I have a German nuclear story, and so this comes in with a background that, as most listeners to our podcast should know, that in 2022 in Germany, the remaining nuclear reactors will be phased out completely, and it will be the sale of electricity from nuclear reactors will be banned by that time. And so Berlin-based newspaper Der Tagesspiegel now has asked some major system operators, namely E.ON, RWE, and ENBW, about a prospect to prolong their remaining nuclear reactor lifetimes. And so this comes as fears increase about major capacity shortages in the German economy, particularly from the business world, but also some sort of center-right uh, political actors. And so all three of them said that, a change of plans is not on the table for them. They don't want to operate these reactors any longer. And that could be surprising because all of these reactors are essentially paid for. The financial amortization has been completed, and they should, the longer you operate them, the bigger your profits become because you only have to recoup the operational cost of that, right? But they are not interested in that. And there are a couple of reasons for that. One is that the companies fear the political environment. So the Fukushima incident in 2011 was a very useful prelude for the long-term goal of the Greens in all kinds of parties in Germany. It's not just the Green Party; it's all kinds. Merkel's quote-unquote conservative Christian Democrats, and the socialists, and all parties are essentially agreeing on that. And so, fighting against that phase-out plan would bear the long-term risk of retribution by these political forces, and also would risk, falling out of favor in public opinion. And even if the profitability of the reactors would look good, like for the next 5 or 10 years, you might say, okay, so there will be no major political shift in our expectations, and we could operate them at least for another decade and make some good money. But you don't know that. I mean, it's the Merkel government pushed for this phase out of nuclear in an accelerated way. And so any change of plans, any additional like Fukushima incident, any news item could change the policy immediately, and the nuclear industry in Germany, and to some extent also in America, is so dependent on politics and governments and the bureaucracy that this would put any business plan in jeopardy. And so the major German power plant operators have aligned their own strategic plans with what's called the energy transition, the Energiewende in German language, which means that the focus should be on renewables, particularly solar and wind, and also decrease in energy use per capita to a significant degree. And the standard buzzwords: energy efficiency, saving energy instead of having to produce it, and so on. And so this is the politics are so pervasive in this industry that I was reminded of part of the novel Atlas Shrugged, which featured Hank Rearden, this industrial sort of hero, the successful businessman and industrialist who just invented this new super alloy, Rearden steel or Rearden metal. And he had a friend or an associate named Paul Larkin very early in the novel, and he came over to his house. And after some conversation, he asked, "Hey Hank, how's your man in Washington?" Because he was a very timid guy, but he realized how important it is in this setting in Atlas Shrugged, in the political setting, to have someone in Washington to have political support for what you're doing, to sway public opinion, and so on. And this is very much what the nuclear industry in Germany, I think, feels. It's just, you can't just vote your pocketbook. You can't just do what would make economic sense, and you can't do what would make industrial sense for the entire economy, even if they were sort of selflessly serving the German industry and just say, "Hey, we want cheap power for you, and we will cut our rates and so on. And nuclear is the way to go." They can't do that because of the strong public opinion against it, and the political forces working against that. So it's a really horrible situation. I think it's emblematic of how like nuclear industry and banking, but maybe nuclear industry is even worse, in how the political pressure is applied to them, and how much of their decisions is taken out of their own hands. And so I call this a quote unquote private sector because, nominally, the capital might be in the hands of private individuals, or at least publicly traded in some form or the other. But the entire regulatory body, uh, everything has to be permitted. There's a sort of public license that you need to operate. You have to look at public opinion about what you are doing before you can be a producer and creator. And that's I think it's really horrible, and the it shows just that the nuclear industry is really the worst hit by this kind of development. It's really, and I fear that to some degree that's already in America, and that's where much of the innovation came from over the decades in nuclear. And if that would stop, that would be really really horrible, because we need in the future, in my personal belief, also in Germany, although the government won't acknowledge that, we will need much more energy, and much more energy per capita. And this has to come from somewhere. So the German government wants to phase out nuclear first, then coal in the late 2030s. And then, yeah, what's left? Solar and wind and some batteries, maybe. Maybe we'll gobble up the entire like lithium and cobalt production of the planet, and this won't suffice for our energy needs.
I think it's really relevant that you mentioned Atlas Shrugged. It was a different aspect of Atlas Shrugged that came to mind for me, which is one of the points in the novel is this idea that the power seekers who go around restricting the freedom of producers, they actually don't have a clue about how their plans are going to work. It's like they have no clue. Well, how's the economy going to function if we make life impossible for the people who are able to produce wealth, technology, and prosperity? They just assume that, well, the producers will keep on going, like they'll make our plan work somehow. And I think that's exactly what's going on in Germany and in the US, is that you have these people shutting down fossil fuels and nuclear, and they have no clue about how they're actually going to maintain reliable electricity. They're just counting on someone to magically figure it out. Like magically, you will make batteries and solar and wind work. You'll make them affordable. And maybe they'll get lucky and someone will figure it out. But that's literally what, under these circumstances, will determine the future of Germany, assuming they don't change course while there's time to change course, and assuming that we don't change course. I mean, it's the equivalent of, you said, all right, in 5 years we're going to ban antibiotics, and like maybe you get lucky and somebody invents an alternative, but do you really want to bet your life on that happening? And yet that's really, I think, what's going on here, is betting your life that somebody else will be able to figure out how to keep your plan from causing a disaster. And then if they do come up with a solution, you have to worry about, well, is that going to be banned too? Because remember, if you actually did have scalable solar, wind, and batteries, the Greens would be the first people to actually oppose it. And they would point out what we've pointed out, that actually, the kind of mining involved in batteries and disposal, the kind of land use that would be involved in scaling wind and solar, like these are major impacts, and their goal is to minimize impacts. And the only way you can minimize impacts is to minimize human life.